With us now, we've got Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger of Illinois. He served in the Air Force in both Iraq and Afghanistan. Also with us, ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee, Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff of California, and in Nashville, Tennessee, retired executive assistant of the FBI, Sean Henry. Congressman, let's begin with you.
Yeah.
What do we do? What do we do from this point forward?
Well, I think it's a couple things. Number one, you guys were talking on the prior segment. We have to watch our language. And now, this isn't our fault. And I think we have to be careful to cross into the, what happened to this guy to make him who he is. But I think, saying things like a Muslim ban is bad because, first off, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, dealt the largest blow to Al-Qaeda recently that's ever been that's ever been put on them in Yemen, and that was work that American soldiers no longer have to do. So I think it's a short-term and it's a long-term target. The short-term target is we have to destroy ISIS. We have to make it clear that their caliphate will not succeed, they will not live, they will not go on. But then the long-term target is understanding, you have generations of people that are looking at the internet, that are uneducated in some cases in Syria right now with what's going on there, that are fertile recruiting ground for ISIS. That's the long-term target. So it's going to take a while. This is a war of ideas.
We have a short window with Sean Henry, so why don't we go to him first before we go to Congressman Schiff?
Now, Sean, we've been talking about this a little this morning. I'd be interested for your take on it, which is in this case you have a guy who didn't have much of a footprint, who perhaps didn't even have any contact with ISIS, but who was inspired by things he read, and then made that phone call right before he began shooting in the nightclub to declare his allegiance with ISIS. What do you do about a guy like that?
Well, we're in a new world, Willie. I don't know what you do specifically. I like the idea. There's been a lot of talk about bringing the community in on this. I think that's absolutely right. I did a lot of outreach. The FBI continues to do outreach to the Muslim community and to look for information where we see somebody who might be making these types of statements. But in a case where you've got somebody who's got almost no profile at all, we've heard his ex-wife talk about him being violent. We've heard his father talk about him with anti-gay comments, and then for him to go out and purchase guns and to take on this type of an attack with really not a lot of information on the front side. The FBI and law enforcement are really hamstrung. People live in this country because of its freedom. Americans embrace that, and some of the things that he said were protected speech. FBI does not have probable cause to arrest him, and when we see an attack like this, it's just such an incredible challenge for our law enforcement community, because for someone to go from being aspirational to operational can happen in moments.
Sounds almost insurmountable in some ways. Congressman Adam Schiff, Sean Henry talking about this new world. Is the intelligence community prepared for this new world?
Well, we're doing our very best. The challenge is that if you have people who are self-radicalized, who radicalize online and don't share their plans or they're plotting with others, it's very hard to stop. And I think, we need a comprehensive approach to this problem that begins as we have to try to roll up ISIS in Iraq and Syria, deprive them of that caliphate, which is the prime recruiting tool and inspiration for a lot of this radicalism around the world. And we have to work harder to try to integrate Muslim communities within the United States. We've done, I think, a very good job, certainly compared to Europe. But as Joe is pointing out, there's more that we can and will need to do, and we need to resist doing things that are counterproductive. And I think David Ignatius is exactly right. These statements about banning Muslims that play right into the ISIS narrative of a clash of civilizations are amazingly counterproductive. And you can imagine how difficult it is to get the full cooperation of many of our Gulf allies who really need to fight the ideological fight as well as the physical fight when we're saying we want to ban even them from coming to the country to coordinate on strategy. So there are some positive steps that we can take, are taking, and I think on the positive side we're seeing the space that ISIS is operating in Iraq and Syria shrink. We also have to deal with the political problems of those two countries to make sure that once we defeat ISIS there, we don't have a subsequent iteration emerge from its ashes.
Congressman Kinzinger, you're the deputy whip on the Republican side. I know guns issue that's just very hard to talk about. You almost don't want to raise them right after a situation like this. But is there some way we can discuss the proliferation of these assault-type, military-type long guns with high ammunition magazines, that some way to cut back the number of these sloshing around our society?
We can always have that discussion. I think it's good to have. That's what the floor House of Representatives is for, is to discuss.
Wallace, Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger, ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee, Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff of California, David Ignatius is still with us in Washington, and Graham Wood of The Atlantic, who's done extensive research and reporting on ISIS, also joining us.
David Ignatius, what did you learn from that investigation?
Well, Joe, several things that struck me in the press conference. One, did the police, FBI, believe that he had other weapons inside that nightclub? There was reference made to suicide vests that he might use. Why did they believe that? Second, I'm sure they're looking today to see if there was any kind of support network for him in Florida or elsewhere. Were there people who he talked to? Were there people who knew that he was acquiring weapons? That's crucial. An issue that I'd love to hear Congressman Schiff and Kinzinger's view on is, what about the question that was put to the FBI local chief about blinking red lights that the FBI should have taken more care to address? Is there a concern, I'd ask these members of Congress who oversee the FBI, that something was missed here?
Let's go to Congressman Schiff first. Congressman.
Well, I think that's certainly one of the questions we're going to be studying, and that is the FBI went out, I guess, in 2013 and 2014, interviewed the suspect perhaps repeatedly, heard concerning comments from coworkers, and the question is there more that the Bureau could have done? It appears, at least publicly, what the Bureau has said is that they didn't have enough to make an arrest. They didn't have enough to prosecute for either conspiracy or material support for terrorism. And as David pointed out earlier, it's not a situation where you can prosecute someone for the exercise of their First Amendment rights even when they're espousing something really pernicious if there's no indication of an imminent threat. So I think it's way too soon to say that the Bureau should have done more, could have done more. I think it's also was an intriguing question at the end of the press conference about whether someone who had been the subject of FBI investigation should have prompted some kind of an alert back to the Bureau when they get these weapons. I don't think that is a requirement at all. It would be a very controversial issue, as indeed the whole gun issue is. But I will say this. We have spent billions and billions to improve intelligence, and we have improved it a great deal. We are sending our troops to fight overseas. The one thing we really have not done at all is address the ready access to these kind of weapons that make it easy to kill a lot of people in a nightclub. That's the one area that has been basically off limits. And I think we need to ask whether we can continue to do that.
We heard from President Obama, who spoke, of course, after the killing spree. We're going to be hearing live from presidential candidate Hillary Clinton, who'll be joining us in just a few moments, getting right on this. And, of course, FBI agents are all over this. Sources tell NBC News' Pete Williams that before opening fire, Mateen called 911, pledged allegiance to ISIS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, and mentioned the 2013 Boston Marathon bombing.
So again, we have Secretary Hillary Clinton is going to be calling us in a few minutes. But go ahead and answer David Ignatius's question. Any concerns about the blinking red lights?
Yeah, I mean, you know, whenever you see this, and we look back too many times and say there were signs, I mean, I think that needs to be obviously something we have a discussion of, you know, what triggers basically that level of our interest. You know, but look, people can have very suicidal desires, and there's not a ton you can do to stop them until they take that first action. Because if they just have it in their heart, you can't screen people's hearts. But when they take that first step,
screen their internet activity?
That's exactly it. When they take that first step.
And Nicole, you were talking before about how aggressively internet companies shut down child pornography immediately, but do not shut down this type of activity quickly.
It's not a capability question, it's a will question. And I think that a lot of people believe the policy debate will shift to whether or not Facebook and Twitter and social media companies can do more. They are remiss to do more in the era of Edward Snowden. They don't want to look like partners of the government.
Right.
But, I mean, as a policymaker, would you like to have them come before you and sort of lay out what they're doing?
Sure. I mean, like I said, it's you don't know if somebody's going to do a terrorist act or become a terrorist until they take that first step.
But the first step often happens in an internet search. It happens on a Facebook, in a chat. I mean, we have sort of accepted this resignation.
That's right.
It's all over David Ignatius' face, but there is a set of things that can be done in the social media space, and I would want to know if...
But again, though...
David...
I'm sorry, on this topic, Congressman, you're a strong supporter of the Second Amendment. I know that you're a member of the NRA, but you've come out for a ban on assault-style weapons, is that right?
No, that's not. No, what I say is we need to have this debate, but I think what gets lost in this, and I know this is going to turn into a gun debate, this is a terrorist attack. I think that's important to remember.
We're not going to do that right now.
I know you're not. But
I
think a bigger point, though, is keep in mind, this happened in France, too. They have very strict gun laws, but this is, when you have a will to kill many, many people like these terrorists do, they're going to find a way to do it.
So did I have that? I thought I've read that you had a ban on assault weapons. No. Okay.
Weapons.
David Ignatius, I'm just wondering, we're talking about Republicans asking them to stand up and be counted as it pertains to the Muslim ban that has been proposed by Donald Trump. And we're going to try and do our own research and find out who does or does not support this, but they should stand up and be counted at this point. I'm wondering if members of the foreign policy community should do the same at this point, if it is so universally understood that this is so destructive and that we are setting ourselves back in time or moving forward into a dangerous, violent zone. Shouldn't members of the foreign policy community at this point speak out collectively and...
I think it's a moment when people really need to examine the consequences of the anti-Muslim rhetoric for our safety as a country. I think foreign policy, intelligence professionals who have knowledge, journalists like me who can interview them and get their views before the public, we really do have a responsibility to do that. I thought it was important that General Hayden, the former director of the NSA and the CIA, was so explicit in saying comments like these, comments about excluding Muslims, isolate that community and put the United States at greater risk in the process. I think if that message becomes clearer so that politicians know if they don't speak out, if they don't condemn these comments, they're really encouraging a situation in which future incidents might happen. The experts I talk to say that the one thing that ISIS has going for it these days is all of this rhetoric, this inflammatory rhetoric, which speaks to their view of the world. We are the victims. We're isolated. We have to stand together. We have to take up arms against the people who would victimize us. And so, you know, cutting off that oxygen so that they're not able to recruit, not able to motivate people to take actions, in some ways is the most important thing that can be done right now.
You know, we've been on now for a couple hours. 2 hours and 11 minutes. Sometimes in the third hour we start speaking in shorthand, just to make sure we keep everything in perspective here. In the first 2 hours, we read it straight. We're starting to move a little bit more into commentary, but if you just woke up on the West Coast and started watching our show 12 minutes ago, obviously nobody around this set is blaming anybody for these acts of terror except the terrorist himself. And we have refrained from the first couple of hours from talking about guns or talking about a lot of the other issues, Donald Trump's tweets. But again, we're moving a bit more because we've been here for going on our third hour into commentary. And we just want to be very careful here. This was an act of terrorism. It was the fault of a terrorist. We, though, do need to look forward and see how we avoid this. I remember after Sandy Hook, it seemed that Democrats only wanted to talk about gun control. It seemed like Republicans only wanted to talk about other issues. We talked about mental health counseling. We talked about video games. Now we're talking about social media. We're talking about inflammatory rhetoric. It's all out there. It's all responsible. I mean, if we're looking forward on how we stop these things from happening in the future, I think it's our responsibility to talk about everything from looking at assault-style weapons, to mental health counseling, to inflammatory rhetoric from politicians, to being more inclusive for Muslim Americans. I just think that's our responsibility. We do want to be very careful, though, at this point to make sure that the onus is entirely on the terrorist who killed 49 people.
Having said that, at a time like this, you look to our leaders and the people who wish to be our leaders.
Totally agree.
And we look at what their language is and what their policies are and what their positions are, and even the temperament of their reactions, because that will lead our country into whatever direction we may go in, depending on who wins the next presidential election. We have to look closely. We have to decide, and America needs to decide exactly what they want. And this is kind of a good time to see someone's true colors.
Right.
We are going to be hearing from presidential candidate Hillary Clinton in just a few moments.
We are.
Congressman Adam Schiff and Congressman Adam Kinzinger, thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.